Hi, welcome to Women Created and Called Live, episode 28. Today, we are going to be talking about cozy cravings. At least that's what I call them. It's when we find ourselves craving comfort. And I have noticed that this is really, it's a piece of really getting to know yourself. Like, this is something that is just helpful to examine and just kind of look at it and decide, is this something that is true for the way that I typically behave? So you can ask yourself that, because this is something that I have noticed in myself. And so we're going to get some real confession here this week on this episode. So a quick little story, I asked my son this morning, I said, what should I talk about on my podcast today? Yeah, here's confession number one, right? I hadn't quite nailed that down yet. And he is 14 years old, and I was driving him to school, and he said, talk about fall. Talk about how it's getting really cold. And when I heard him say this, I remembered that a couple of years ago, I actually noticed this, that in the fall season, I start to crave the feeling of cozy. Really feeling cozy. I just want to crawl under a blanket and have hot chocolate or cider or something and just be cozy and warm. And I guess I just really don't like feeling cold. I say this, and right now my fingers are chilly. They're a little cool, but maybe I'll have to go find a blanket in a little while. But so that was my son's suggestion, and I thought, okay, I could do that. Definitely. So like I said, I call these cozy cravings. And what I noticed, like I said, I noticed this about myself a couple of years ago, and I actually had written down a whole bunch of notes about it, because that was when I started an old blog that I have called Mamahood to Sainthood. And so a lot of these notes are what I wrote down back then. I don't even remember if I actually created the blog post on this topic or not, but I had all of the notes all ready to go. And it's interesting because I was going back through these notes and it all still rings true. I mean, I've gotten it better about not letting these cravings take over as much, but sometimes it still happens, And I also have found that I think a little bit differently about those times when I am not comfy and cozy. I think of them very differently now. So I'm going to be sharing some of that. I'm going to be sharing in this episode how these cozy cravings, or, craving comfort, can be really helpful sometimes. And they can also create some risky pitfalls that I've noticed I need to watch out for, and maybe it's true for you too. So I thought that would be helpful. And then I'm also going to share 4 tips for keeping these cozy cravings in check. So that's what's coming up on this episode. So first, I want to kind of talk about how there can be virtuous things about these cozy cravings and what could lead to vice. So first, the virtuous things. Now, when we talk about virtue, I want you to think about a spectrum. So let's take, typical virtue that we might think of, maybe like humility. And think about humility, and we have a spectrum. And on one end of the spectrum, we have pride. And that is where you have no humility at all. You are very prideful. You think your way is the best and only way. And there's a lot of, it's the vice of pride. And then on the opposite end of that spectrum, we have self-loathing. Or sometimes it can be called false humility. And, self-loathing is really taking that to the extreme. And so that's what's on both ends of this spectrum. And the place where virtue lives is right in the middle of this spectrum. That is where humility is. It's between pride and self-loathing. It's right in the middle. And that is what we strive for. So if we're thinking of virtue in that way, then these things would fall kind of in the middle of that spectrum. So the virtuous things about comfort or feeling cozy is that, and again, these are things that I have noticed in my own life. When I think of the good things about this, I realize that craving that comfort can motivate me to work quickly on things when I am thinking of it as a reward. And I want to hurry and finish the task that I'm doing so that I know that coming up, when I finish that task, I can sit and relax for a few minutes. I can go crawl under that blanket and get warm and cozy. Or I can reward myself with a warm cup of coffee or tea or a hot cider or hot chocolate or whatever it is. So that's one way for me to look at it, and it can help motivate me. Another one is that it can feel really peaceful. And when I think of that peaceful feeling, it kind of helps me think that I'm getting a hint or a little glimpse of what heaven might be like. I just think of that peace that hopefully, God willing, when I get to heaven, that I'm going to be able to experience. And this is especially true when I am seeking that feeling of comfort or coziness inside of prayer time. That is a wonderful feeling when I can experience that during prayer. Another time when this feeling of comfort and coziness can be virtuous is that it can foster family togetherness. And again, I'm going back to things like hot chocolate or cider and having that together as a family, or maybe it's playing cards together or board games or watching movies, or especially in the fall, we might think about sitting around a fire together. Although I have to admit, in my family, that just doesn't happen all that often. I keep thinking that I want to do that, and then it just kind of doesn't happen. Maybe I need to get more intentional about creating that experience with my family, and even enrolling them into the idea that they want to do that too. I gotta get them on board. And another thing that can be really great about having these cravings for comfort and coziness is that it makes me want to create a cozy home environment for my family. So that can be a great thing. And those are the ones that I came up with. Okay, so now just shift to things that can lead to vice when it comes to seeking that comfort or that cozy feeling. And again, we find vice at both ends of this virtue spectrum. So I've noticed that in me, okay, again, here's confession time. I've noticed that in me, sometimes this craving for coziness can lead to idleness and even the sin of sloth or sloth, whichever way you say it. It can prevent me from doing, from actually taking action. And this can become a problem because then it means that I'm not following through with things. Another way that it can lead to vice for me that I've noticed is that it can cause unhealthy food choices for me. Sometimes I just want to eat the comfort food, but comfort food can sometimes be pretty unhealthy. So it's just something that I need to watch out for. And hey, how about if we can find foods that actually are good for us and decide that those bring us comfort? Hey, how about that? That's totally possible. Another way that it can start to lead to vice is sometimes seeking those feelings of comfort and coziness can become an idol. If we value that feeling, if we value our comfort over our vocation. So a few ways that I've noticed that this could show up and has shown up sometimes for me is starting to have a feeling of entitlement. Like I deserve to be comfortable. That's one to watch out for. It really is. Another way that that can show up for me is if I'm valuing the comfort and making an idol of it, and it becomes more important than my vocation, it might mean that I neglect things that I have promised to do. And so therefore I'm being unfaithful to my word. Or it could be I'm neglecting to do things that I need to do simply because of my vocation. As a wife, as a mom, as a coach in my business, different things like that. So it's about not following through because I am holding this comfort to be more important than my vocation. And here's an interesting one. Remember, I said that something that can be virtuous is wanting to create a cozy home environment. Well, sometimes that can be taken to the extreme. Again, it's like, on the spectrum, right? If you take that to an extreme where creating a cozy home is almost like an idol that's more important, it can, especially I'm thinking of decor in your home. I want it to feel cozy, and so I want it to look a certain way, and I have to watch out for if wanting it to look a certain way becomes more important than the relationships in my life. And I can see this happening sometimes if someone wants, let's say, for example, this throw blanket belongs in a certain place. It has a home. So when you tidy up, that's where it belongs. Well, if I am getting upset that maybe it's been left on the couch after somebody used it, or, things are getting cluttered on the coffee table, and the nice little arrangement that I had to make it look nice is it becomes so important that I'm snapping at my family for not keeping it looking nice. Again, that desire for a cozy and comfortable feeling in the home is becoming more important than the relationships in my life. That is definitely not what we're looking for, and that definitely can lead to vice. So that's one of the things to watch out for. And again, all of these are coming from my own experience. I have seen these show up in my life at different times. I have gotten much better at it now. Like I said, I wrote a lot of this a couple of years ago, and it was before I had experienced very much coaching. And I have noticed big differences that spill over into all areas of my life from my coaching experiences. So to continue, so what we're really looking for here is a healthy balance between self-care. Sometimes it's self-care, right? You just need to rest, and something called clean rest that I learned from a woman who is a coach. Her name is Sam Laura Brown. You can look up her podcast. And she talks about clean rest. And that's the idea that I intentionally put rest time on my calendar. And during that time, that's exactly where I am meant to be during that time. And so I am not feeling guilty about anything else that happened outside of during that time. So for example, if there are things that I didn't finish in my work, if there is something that I didn't get done for my home, like, oh, I didn't get that laundry folded or whatever it is, I'm not letting those things intrude on my rest time. And the best way to do that is to actually get those things done during the times when I have set aside to do those things. And then you can have really great clean rest. So anyway, that's that concept of clean rest. So we're looking for a healthy balance between self-care and clean rest, and the other side of things, the flip side of the coin, so to speak, where we have virtuous work and faithfulness to our duties within our vocation and what God calls you to. It's so important to have a balance between those things that require action and the times when we are taking care of ourselves with rest. And what I've noticed is that it seems like one leads to the other and back again. So what I mean is those times when you have great self-care, you're taking care of yourself, you're resting when you need to, lead to better work, better opportunities to have the energy for action and to follow through on these duties that are part of your vocation, and to have enough energy to do the things that God is calling you to do. So that rest is important to be able to do those things, but also sometimes doing the work and staying faithful to the work and the duties of your vocation and all of those things, actually taking action during those times makes it possible for you to have that really clean rest. Like I said before, the things that are work get to be done during work time. And the things that are for your rest and so that you can gain that energy is during the rest time. So it is a two-way street. Absolutely. And so we're looking for a healthy balance between the two. So there is also great value in intentionally choosing discomfort. Now, this is something, again, this was not in my notes when I wrote most of this a couple of years ago because I didn't know it yet. This is something that I definitely have learned as I have learned more about personal development and coaching. And that is that stretching yourself leads to growth. Every time that we are stretched outside of our comfort zone, it leads to growth. If we intentionally choose to do it. And when I say growth, I mean both mentally and spiritually, and also physically. If you think about working out, that's exactly what you're doing, is you're stretching your physical limits, and then suddenly those 10 reps become very easy because you have done them so often. They were hard at first, but you stretched yourself outside of your comfort zone, and now 10 reps of something, maybe you're lifting weights or you're doing the push-ups or the sit-ups or whatever it is, suddenly 10 is a piece of cake. And then you get to stretch yourself again so that you can continue to grow. It's the same thing with your mental growth. You're actually showing your brain that it is safe. There is safety and even satisfaction outside of your comfort zone. That's what happens when you stretch yourself. You find out that you actually can do hard things. And when you have done this many times, you create evidence for your brain. So the next time that you are thinking and considering doing something that feels hard, that is definitely outside of your comfort zone, you can remind your brain, hey, I can do hard things. See this other time that I did that? I got uncomfortable and look what happened. I'm still alive. I'm safe, and that felt really good to do that because now I know that I can do hard things. So that's how stretching yourself leads to growth mentally. How about spiritually? When you stretch yourself and you let God lead you to a place where you are really clearly and keenly aware of your dependence on Him, you know that He is asking you to do something that you cannot do on your own. And you are so very much aware that you need Him constantly. This is how you grow in holiness. You know that doing that thing is not going to feel comfy or cozy or any of those nice, warm, fuzzy feelings. You're not going to have any of that. And you know that He's calling you to it. When you respond, that feeling that He is calling you to something bigger like that is a grace. It's a gift from Him. And when you respond to it, this is your opportunity to grow in holiness, like I said. So, 4 simple tips for you for how we can begin to keep these cozy cravings in check. Number 1, do an honest, what I call heart check. Check in with your heart by asking yourself, what am I really craving? Maybe it's not the comfort food. maybe it's not warmth under a blanket. Maybe there's something deeper that I'm actually craving. One of the pieces to this is, am I seeking pleasure, which for our purposes here, I'll define as a short-term satisfaction. You know, maybe it's a short thing that gives you a hit of dopamine, that chemical in your brain that just is the pleasure-seeking chemical. Am I seeking pleasure, which is, again, going to be a short-term thing, or am I seeking happiness? Happiness is something deeper. You can be happy and peaceful even, what is the word I'm thinking of? It's joy. You can feel a deep sense of joy even if you're feeling sad. I know it sounds like opposites, but it's a deeper emotion that is not fleeting. It's how people who have so many struggles, you know, exteriorly, on the surface, it looks like they have so many struggles in life. Maybe they struggle to have enough to eat. Maybe they get by on very, very little. Maybe they have all kinds of hardships in their life. And yet, you can see that they have this peacefulness about them. You can see that they still have joy. One example that I think of is Mother Teresa. She experienced so much joy. We see pictures of her with just the beaming smile on her face, and she had a deep joy. And she had a whole lot of trials and struggles in her life. Not only the exterior ones, as she took care of the poorest of the poor, but also interiorly, she suffered from a dark night of the soul. And that was going for years and years and years, decades actually, feeling no consolation from God that he was close to her, feeling no sort of reinforcement that she was doing things that pleased him. Those are consolations, and she went for decades not feeling those. But she knew, because she was so close to the Lord, even though she didn't feel him close to her, she was close to him because she was near him in the Eucharist every single day, multiple times a day. If you look at her daily schedule for herself and for her community, they were having Mass daily. They were having time in adoration. They clung to Jesus in everything. And this is how they experienced that deeper joy. And she experienced the deep joy even though she wondered if he was even near her. She didn't feel that sense of comfort. There was nothing comfort, cozy and comfy about Mother Teresa's life. And yet we know she felt so much joy. So that's the difference between pleasure and happiness. And so check in with yourself and ask yourself, what am I really craving here? Am I going to crave and go for that short-term pleasure? Or am I really craving something deeper? Am I craving a deeper happiness that will last long-term? even into eternity. Another part of this is something else that you might be craving is connected relationships with your family or with God. Is that what you're actually craving? And in terms of food, maybe, at least food is what comes up for me with this one. Are you actually craving nourishment? If you find yourself craving comfort food, maybe you're actually craving nourishment. Maybe there is something that your body needs physically as far as nutrients. And instead of realizing that, you're going for the comfort food, which, again, often, not always, often can be an unhealthy choice. It doesn't serve you well in the long run. So that's one tip, is to do an honest heart check and ask yourself, what am I really craving? Then the second tip I have for you is to keep your priorities in mind. And think about for yourself, have you ever sat down and very, very clearly written out what you value most in your life? Have you actually done that exercise? I have to give props to my coach, Lisa Canning, because this is an exercise that she takes you through in a couple of her different programs, where you sit down and you list out your most important priorities for your life. And then you plan your life around those priorities. It's the best way to, I hesitate to use the term time management or to manage your time, but really that's what it is. It's not really managing time. We all have the same amount, but it's about being clear about what your priorities are and putting those into your calendar and letting go of things that are not a priority for you. There's so much peace in that. And then let those priorities. So if you haven't done that exercise, I highly encourage that you do. And, maybe it's a list about 5 to 7 things that you value most in your life, and list them in order. And then let these priorities guide you and guide the appropriate place of seeking comfort in your life. Again, we're looking for a healthy balance, right? So keep your priorities in mind. That's tip number 2. Now, tip number 3, plan ahead. And that is using these cravings that you have for comfort, for coziness, let them be motivation and a reward. God gave us the Sabbath for a very important purpose, right? We could do work all day, for 6 days of the week, and He wants us to rest on the Sabbath. Whether in our modern world, whether you're able to, do a full Sabbath, take an entire day and focus solely on the Lord and the gifts in your life and your dependence on Him, whether you're able to do that for an entire day or not, set that aside. What He shows us He even made that one of the top commandments, right? What He shows us in giving us that command is the importance of rest. And not only of rest, but of resting in Him. And so, let that be planned. Let your rest time be planned ahead. Like I was talking about before, put intentional times of clean rest into your calendar. And those are the moments when you can cuddle up under that blanket, enjoy the hot chocolate and the cider with your family, enjoy playing the board games or card games or whatever you like to do together, watching a movie, sitting around a fire, whatever it is. Let those be moments that motivate you and serve as a reward for a job well done and the work that you did the rest of the day. Now, that being said, I want to just put a little caveat in here, because I don't want you to feel like, on the opposite end of the spectrum. We talked about feelings of entitlement, that you deserve this cozy comfort. That's one end of a spectrum. The other end is feeling like you don't deserve it and you shouldn't have those moments because you didn't get the work done. And I don't want you to go to that end of the spectrum either. Again, the place of virtue is the place in the middle. So, again, we're looking for a healthy balance. Balance those times of work and those times of clean rest. And plan ahead and put it into your calendar. So tip number 4 for keeping these cozy cravings in check is to ask God to help you seek your comfort only in Him, instead of in things or people that will inevitably fall short of what you are really craving. Remember the quote from St. Augustine: "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it rests in you." So that's the ultimate comfort. That's the ultimate cozy, is when we seek Him. And that's where we'll find it. So this topic, I hope that these 4 tips have been helpful for you. And before that, the examination of really looking at, how often are you craving comfort? And does it have a proper place in your life? Is it on the ends of the spectrum as far as where we find vice, or is it somewhere in the middle where you can create a healthy balance between those moments of comfort and the moments of intentionally seeking to get uncomfortable? So this topic and many of the topics that I talk about on this podcast fits into one of the 5 pillars that Women Created and Called Coaching is built on. And that pillar is, I call it encounter. And the encounter pillar is about encountering God so that you can encounter the real you. Now, why is this so important? Here's why. Beliefs about who God is and what He says about you have a huge impact on beliefs that you have about yourself. And all of that impacts your ability to make decisions, take bold actions, and then trust God with the outcome. So if you are a Catholic working mom who struggles with these things, I want you to know that those struggles, again, making decisions, taking bold action, and trusting God with the outcome, those struggles are impacting every part of your life, both personally and professionally. And I want you to know that coaching can help that. That is exactly what we do inside of my new signature coaching program called Your Trust Walk. So if you are ready to explore what that could look like for you, I invite you to schedule a complimentary consultation call and just put the word consult in the comments of this episode, or click on the scheduling link that is in the description. And I can't wait to meet you. And meanwhile, until next week, I'll see you then next week for another episode of Women Created Uncalled Live. And until then, God bless you and all those that you love. Bye.